I'm from a small town in Kansas, and when I was about 16 years old, I was in the shopping mall in our little town and just in the Claire's boutique looking around at jewelry and such, and a mom and her two sons walked in, and as they were talking together, I noticed that there was something interesting in the dynamic in this trio, in that the oldest brother, maybe he was around 12 or 13, was really talking disrespectfully and rudely to both the mom and the younger brother. And it was very apparent, very rude, very intense. And I was a pretty outspoken person back then and probably still am. And I just turned to the boy and I said, "Hey, buddy, like, that's not okay to talk to your mom that way. And someday you're going to really regret it. So, you really need to think about what you're saying and how you're responding to her and your brother." And that just, prompted a lot of thinking for me, just about my own life, because I was that kid as well who just, acted and behaved in certain ways and didn't honor my relationships and didn't really understand myself to do so. And so my name is Monica Maurer, and I'm a licensed therapist, and I am so interested in helping you and myself create connection in this lonely and disconnected world where we all live. And I think something that really is important in regard to creating connection is understanding ourselves, right? And understanding why we act the way we do, what our behaviors are, why they're happening the way they are, so that we can overcome and grow, not be held back by the things that we've experienced and the way that we have interpreted the things in our lives. And so it's really about relationship. Everything's about relationship, and we need to figure out how to process our lives so that we can do relationship well. And if we have up until this point not done relationship well, or we find ourselves with relationships that just really we aren't experiencing the joy that's intended in relationship, we need to think about doing an overhaul, completely doing a makeover on our relationships. And there are a few points to discuss in regard to that. The first one that I think is really important is this idea that every person is worthy of love and belonging. They are worthy just because they exist. They don't have to do anything to deserve more worth. They don't have to do anything to be worthy of love and belonging. They just are. Every single human. And that is a hard concept, because some people behave in such ways that we think, well, they're not worth it. They're a mess. They don't deserve anybody to love them. But reality is, we are all worth something. And our behavior doesn't always indicate that, but who we are at our core needs to be able to be accepted just because we exist. So when you think about the important relationships in your life, it's really important to kind of go back and discern in your own heart, do I love these people just because they exist, or do I expect something from them in order that they would earn my acceptance or unconditional regard? As therapists, we say, one of our mottos is that we offer unconditional positive regard. No matter what a person says to us in our office, how they respond to us, or what they've done in their life, what behavior they've engaged with, because we believe that people are worthy of love just because they exist. They're worthy of us hearing them. And that only when a person feels totally accepted just because they exist does their brain allow themselves to attach to another in such a way that provides the opportunity for growth and healing. And so unless we are able to give someone unconditional regard, acceptance just based on their existence and not on their behavior, will they actually be able to face whatever is causing their behavior? And I believe that's what that young man that day needed. Not that he didn't need somebody to say, "Hey buddy, that's not okay," but it's more like, "Hey buddy, that's not okay, and you know what? I know that there's something behind the way that you're speaking to your mom and brother. There's a reason that you're acting like that. That's not your true identity. That's more your wounded self. And I want you to know that I see that. And let's work on your woundedness and your behavior that's coming out of your woundedness. But I want you to know that at the foundation, you are worthy of my attention, admiration, affection, connection, just because you exist. The second point is the idea that people are more important than the problems that they cause or the problems that they end up bringing our way, the problems that we feel when we're in their presence. Oftentimes, because of our own maturity level, because we don't feel that we have the capacity to manage a lot, what happens is we get upset with others because of their behavior, and it causes us to turn against them and make them the enemy rather than accepting them, because we don't have the capacity to deal with what they're dealing with. But if we say to ourselves, just live by this motto that people are always more important than problems. Never is a problem worth more than my relationship. We would get through a lot more. I know in my relationships, and I know in a lot of the relationships with people that I work with, there's a sense of a brokenness that comes. You know, we could be friends so long, but then when it comes to something difficult, oftentimes we can't get through those conversations. There was a point in my young adult years where there was somebody working under me in my position, in my job, and there was a tough conversation that needed to be had, and I didn't want to have that conversation because I knew that person didn't intend to do any harm, but I had to correct them, and we had to adjust something that I knew was going to be really painful for them. And I went to them and somehow handled that relationally, even though I didn't have all the skills I needed at that point. And I was just so glad that we got to the other side of it and could continue the relationship. Oftentimes what happens is we block ourselves. We think, I don't know what to do here, so I just disconnect from the person completely. Or we have the conversation and then it doesn't go so well, and then it's awkward between us and we don't know what to do to repair or have a better relationship in the future. It's so important that we learn the skills that we need, which we will be continuing to discuss in my episodes. So please continue to stay tuned. But this idea of having the skills that we need to navigate difficult conversations so that we can keep our relationships more important, bigger than the problems that we encounter in the relationships. Problems are going to come. It's a given. It's 100% going to happen. You cannot have a relationship without having a complication or a problem that needs to be worked through. What we want to do is we want to handle those problems relationally so the relationships are stronger at the end. And we need skills, we need capacity, we need maturity to be able to do that. And we are definitely going to be discussing that more and more in coming episodes. The third point for making over or redoing your relationship cycle or skills is to realize that the only way to get true joy, true happiness, true fulfillment in life is through relationships. We often try to find our relational joy in other ways, even in things that we think are somewhat good, like technology or television or food or exercise or accomplishments, work. We oftentimes are trying to find our fulfillment and our joy in those things. But reality is true joy only comes from relational connection. We can have some type of fulfillment through things that we do with our lives, ways that we are fulfilled. I love my job and I feel so fulfilled when I've been able to help someone, but it really has so much to do with the fact that it's a person I'm helping, and there's a relationship that's being formed that feels like I'm doing something with my life that's meaningful and powerful because of that. So when we look to things outside of relationship, disconnected from relationships, let's just take exercise, for instance. If I'm just using exercise as a way of getting my fulfillment, then what happens is I get a dopamine rush or a chemical release in my brain that makes me feel good based on that accomplishment, or how my physique is looking, or how much weight I've lost, or how I've pushed myself and overcome. And then that is providing me with that dopamine release that tells me, hey, this is what gives life meaning. What happens in a situation like that is, in order for me to continue to get that same amount of chemical release in the brain that tells me I'm satisfied, I have to push myself harder and harder and have more and more and more. And so can you imagine, what kind of a bulked up bodybuilder would I be if I was finding all my joy in just what my physique looked like? Or let's take for instance technology. I know it's a major topic in homes, right? Technology is a major thing, especially because of teens growing up in this technology culture, and now there's so many ways to connect on technology with other people. So let's just say though, I was just consumed with playing my video game, and I needed to play that game in order to find any type of fulfillment. Then I'm going to need increasingly more amount of time on that video game. I'm going to need more success on that video game in order to feel a sense of fulfillment, in order to get the same amount of chemical release, dopamine release to my brain. But relationships not like that. When I am skillful in my relationships, when I know how to connect, which again we will be talking about in further episodes, when I know how to connect in relationships, I am able to get a fulfillment that actually satisfies. It fulfills my heart in ways that I never knew possible. And that gives me a sense of being able to completely be at rest, completely be at peace, and completely satiated in a way that nothing else on the earth can satisfy. I've been married, like I've said before, about 23 years. We'll be at 24 this summer. And when my husband and I started learning these concepts, we started practicing some of these skills. And he's like, these are different. I have never, related to someone in this way. And for me, I hadn't either, but I just wanted to practice as I was learning the neuroscience of how to build stronger connections and attachments and belonging. And we just found ourselves craving that connection. I remember him texting me while I was at work one day and said, hey, let's try that activity again tonight. That was really powerful. And I'm finding myself really desiring to connect in that way because it satisfies my soul. It satisfies my soul. It makes every type of connection better. Going out to dinner, going for a walk, any type of intimacy is better because I'm doing it in a way that satisfies my soul. And so there are several things you can do here to start your practice on, just redoing your strategies for relationships. My challenge to you is to think about one of the relationships in your life that's really important to you and start applying these 3 things that I mentioned to you today. Apply them again and again and again, and just rehearse the wording in your mind so that you can know that you're doing your best in those relationships to give the other person and give yourself mutual satisfaction in the connection. So you're living out your life with relational joy that is truly satisfying you and those around you, and modeling that for those in your community.